Have you ever wondered how digital footprints can betray even the most careful criminals in the modern age of constant connectivity? While many offenders go to great lengths to scrub their presence or wear gloves to hide fingerprints, they often forget the digital breadcrumbs they leave behind in the virtual world. This is the story of a burglary that was solved not by high-tech forensics or a lucky break from a witness, but by the sheer carelessness of the perpetrator himself. It serves as a stark reminder that, in our interconnected society, one small mistake on a social media platform can lead law enforcement right to your front door. The setting for this bizarre series of events is the quiet working-class city of South St. Paul, Minnesota. It is a place where neighbors typically know one another and crime rates are relatively manageable compared to the sprawling metropolis of the nearby Twin Cities. The streets are lined with modest single-family homes, and the community has a rhythm of predictable routine. It was the summer of the year 2014, a time when social media usage was exploding across mobile devices and desktop computers alike, becoming an integral part of daily existence for millions of Americans. James Wood was a resident of this peaceful community, living in a typical house that he had worked hard to maintain. He was an ordinary man who valued his privacy and the sanctity of his home. Like many people, he viewed his house as a fortress of solitude, a place where he could retreat from the demands of the world. On a fateful day in June, he left his residence to go about his daily business, assuming that his property would remain secure in his absence, just as it had countless times before. However, the sanctity of the Wood residence was about to be violated in a manner that was both frightening and absurdly comical. While James Wood was away, a stranger was prowling the neighborhood looking for an opportunity. This individual was not a master thief or a sophisticated career criminal, but rather an opportunistic drifter looking for quick cash and valuables. He spotted the house and decided to make his move, breaching the perimeter and gaining access to the private sanctuary inside. When James Wood returned home later that afternoon, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. The atmosphere in the house had shifted, and the subtle signs of disturbance were evident to a keen eye. He walked through the front door and noticed items were out of place. Drawers had been pulled open, and personal belongings were scattered across the floor. The sinking feeling of violation hit him hard as he realized that a stranger had been rummaging through his life while he was away. As he moved deeper into the house, assessing the damage, James Wood began to inventory the missing items. He noticed that cash he had kept in the house was gone, along with his credit cards and a luxury watch. These were standard targets for a burglar, items that could be easily carried and quickly converted into money. The thief had clearly spent some time in the residence, selecting what to take and what to leave behind. But then James Wood discovered something that made this burglary entirely unique and perplexing. Lying on the floor were a pair of wet jeans and a belt that did not belong to him. It appeared that the intruder had not only robbed the house, but had also taken the time to change his clothes. The thief had swapped his own wet, rain-soaked attire for a clean pair of pants belonging to James Wood. This strange intimacy of the crime was unsettling, but it was only the beginning of the oddities. James Wood continued his inspection and walked over to his desk, where his personal computer was set up. He expected to find the machine stolen or perhaps damaged, but instead he found it sitting there with the screen active. The intruder had used the computer during the robbery. James leaned in closer to see what was on the monitor, assuming the thief might have been searching for banking information or passwords to steal his identity. What he saw on the screen made his jaw drop in disbelief. The browser was open to the social media site Facebook, but it was not James Wood's profile that was logged in. The burglar had used the victim's computer to log into his own personal Facebook, account to check his messages and status updates. In his haste to leave with the stolen goods, the criminal had committed the cardinal sin of digital security. He had failed to log out. Staring back at James Wood from the computer screen was the profile of a man named Nicholas Wigg. The profile picture showed a young Caucasian male with a thin build and short hair. It was a surreal moment where the victim was virtually face to face with the perpetrator while standing in the middle of the crime scene. The digital identity of the thief was laid bare, complete with his full name, his photographs, and his list of friends. Nicholas Wigg was 26 years old at the time and had a history of minor run-ins with the law. He was not a criminal mastermind, but rather a chaotic individual whose life seemed to be a series of poor decisions. His decision to check his social media in the middle of a felony burglary would soon cement his reputation as one of the most incompetent criminals in the history of the state of Minnesota. The audacity of the act was matched only by its stupidity. James Wood sat down at his computer, stunned by the gift that had been dropped into his lap. He clicked through the profile, confirming that this was indeed a real person and likely the man who had just robbed him. He saw recent posts and interactions that gave him a window into the life of the man, who was currently wearing his clothes and spending his cash. It was a goldmine of information that detectives usually have to work weeks to uncover. James Wood wasted no time in contacting the South St. Paul Police Department. He called them and explained the situation, telling the dispatcher that he had been robbed, but he knew exactly who did it because the thief left his Facebook open. The police officers who arrived at the scene were initially skeptical, or perhaps just amused by the story. It is not every day that a victim solves the case within minutes of walking through the door. When the officers examined the computer and saw the open profile of Nicholas Wigg, they realized that James Wood was telling the truth. They took photos of the screen and gathered the wet clothes left behind as physical evidence. The wet jeans were a crucial link, tying the physical intruder to the digital profile. The investigation, which normally would have started with dusting for fingerprints and canvassing neighbors, now had a prime suspect and a name. However, Nicholas Wigg was not immediately in custody. He was somewhere out in the city possessing the stolen credit cards and the watch. The police needed to locate him before he could disappear or fence the stolen goods. James Wood, feeling emboldened by the advantage he held, decided to take matters into his own hands to speed up the process. He decided to use the open Facebook connection to communicate directly with the thief. In a move that surprised everyone, James Wood posted a status update on Nicholas Wigg's own profile using the open computer. He wrote a message stating that Nicholas had broken into his house and left his profile open. He even included his own phone number, telling Wigg to call him if he wanted his wet jeans and other items back. It was a bold psychological play, challenging the thief in the public square of his own social network. Amazingly, Nicholas Wigg saw the message. Later that same day, James Wood received a text message from the suspect. Nicholas Wigg did not run or hide. Instead, he engaged with his victim. He seemed concerned about the clothes he had left behind, and perhaps he underestimated the situation, thinking he could negotiate his way out of it. The two men began a text conversation that would lead to the thief's downfall. James Wood played it cool. He told Nicholas Wigg that he just wanted his things back and that they could meet up to exchange the items. He offered to return the wet clothes if Nicholas would return the stolen electronics and the watch. It was a trap, a classic sting operation set up not by seasoned detectives, but by a homeowner who had been violated and wanted justice. Nicholas Wigg agreed to the terms. The arrangement was set for that very night. Nicholas Wigg agreed to meet James Wood on the street near the residence in South St. Paul. James immediately informed the police of the plan. The officers were ready to spring into action, but they needed Nicholas Wigg to show up and confirm his identity. The stage was set for a confrontation that felt like it belonged in a movie script rather than real life. As the designated time approached, James would watch the street with anticipation. He spotted a man walking down the road who matched the profile picture on the computer screen. It was Nicholas Wigg. He was walking toward the house, apparently believing that he was going to swap some stolen goods for his old laundry and walk away scot-free. The lack of awareness was staggering. James Wood identified the man to the police, who were positioned nearby. As Nicholas Wigg approached the meeting spot, he was not greeted by a friendly exchange of property. Instead, he was swarmed by officers from the South St. Paul Police Department. The trap had worked perfectly. The man who had left his digital signature at the crime scene had walked right back into the arms of the law. During the arrest, the officers noticed something telling about Nicholas Wigg's appearance. He was wearing a watch that looked very familiar. It was the watch stolen from James Wood's home earlier that day. This was the final piece of undeniable physical evidence. Not only did they have the Facebook profile and the wet clothes, but the suspect was caught red-handed wearing the proceeds of the burglary. Nicholas Wigg seemed confused by the turn of events. He had walked into the situation thinking he could outsmart the victim, or perhaps that the victim would not involve the police. His capture was swift and decisive. He was handcuffed and placed in the back of a squad car, bringing an end to his brief and ill-fated spree. The officers likely marveled at how easy the suspect had made their job. The news of the arrest spread quickly. The story of the burglar who checked Facebook and forgot to log out was too good for the media to ignore. It was picked up by local news stations in Minnesota and then syndicated across the United States and eventually the world. Nicholas Wigg became the face of digital incompetence, earning titles like the world's dumbest criminal in various headlines. In the aftermath, James Wood was relieved to have his property returned and his peace of mind restored. He spoke to reporters about the absurdity of the situation, expressing his disbelief that anyone could be so careless while committing a crime. He became a minor local celebrity for his quick thinking and his role in setting the trap that caught the thief. Nicholas Wigg was charged with second-degree burglary. The evidence against him was overwhelming. There was no need for complex DNA testing or lengthy witness interviews. His own social media account, his text messages, and the fact that he was wearing the victim's watch made a defense virtually impossible. He faced the full weight of the legal system for his actions. During the legal proceedings, the details of the crime were read into the record, solidifying the story as a cautionary tale for criminals everywhere. Nicholas Wigg eventually pleaded guilty to the charges. The judge sentenced him to time in prison, ensuring that he would be off the streets of South St. Paul for a significant period. The wet jeans and the Facebook profile were key exhibits in the narrative of his guilt. This case highlights a fascinating shift in the landscape of crime and investigation. In the past, criminals worried about footprints and fingerprints. Today, they must worry about digital data, GPS coordinates, and social media timestamps. The compulsion to be connected to check notifications and to update statuses is so strong that it can override the primal instinct of self-preservation, even during the commission of a felony. Psychologists and criminologists have looked at cases like this to understand the modern criminal mind. The need for dopamine hits from social media engagement can be an addiction that clouds judgment. For Nicholas Wigg, that addiction was his undoing. He prioritized checking his feed over securing his escape, and that prioritization cost him his freedom. The legacy of the Nicholas Wigg case remains a humorous but educational chapter in true crime history. It is frequently cited in discussions about operational security and digital hygiene. It serves as the ultimate example of how technology has made it harder to hide in the shadows. For the police, it was an easy win, but for the rest of us, it is a story that proves truth is often stranger than fiction. As we move further into the digital age where our devices are extensions of our bodies, the line between our physical and virtual selves continues to blur. The story of the criminal who left his Facebook profile open is a permanent reminder that we leave traces of ourselves everywhere we go. In the end, Nicholas Wigg did not just leave his profile open. He left the door to his jail cell open and walked right in.